Welcome back to another episode of the Innovate On Purpose podcast, hosted by Matt Mueller,
best-selling author of The Mindful Innovator and Rethink Retail's top retail expert.
We help retail leaders find clarity so they can grow their businesses purposefully.
We will uncover mindful tips, innovative solutions, and purposeful leadership advice and strategies that you can apply immediately to your retail innovation. Are you ready to innovate on purpose?
Hey, before we jump into the episode today, I just wanted to say thank you for hitting the play button. You being here fires me up, and I cannot wait to share with you the insights that are going to make a difference in your business. Do me a favor, hit the subscribe button and leave a review so I can reach as many retail leaders as possible. They too need to hear this. Okay, let's do it. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Innovate On Purpose. Today we are going to be talking about managing change from the C-suite, a very important topic for us to discuss here because no matter what industry, but very specifically in retail and in CPG, managing change can be really difficult. It's an industry that hasn't changed much. So I'm not the expert here, but we do have an expert on the line, and that's Adam Boddison. He's the CEO of the Association for Project Management. Adam's an experienced CEO focused on blending education with enterprise and has facilitated sustainable social change with meaningful results. So Adam, welcome to the show today.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here.
So glad to have you. This is a really important topic, talking about managing change and project management and managing change go hand in hand for sure. But I'd love to kind of just start off by getting a little bit into your background, Adam. Tell us about your journey and what led you to CEO of the Association for Project Management.
Yeah, no, well, I think it's worth saying at the outset, I never had on my question of, when they say in school, what do you want to be when you grow up? I wasn't saying, look, I want to be a CEO, right? That wasn't part of the plan. So to a certain extent, it's kind of happened by accident, and I've just taken chances as they come up. But, I started life out as a secondary school mathematics teacher. Interestingly, teaching things like critical path analysis, which turned out to be quite useful later on in a kind of project type role. But started life out as a math teacher, did a range of education roles, both in the kind of teacher development space, but also kind of business development, international education, and trying to bring education to parts of the world where, maybe that's not the norm, it's not a standard part of the offer, if you like, as it is in some parts of the world. So that was really rewarding. I then got into the charity space, particularly working with children with special needs and disabilities and looking at making sure that they had good life chances. But I suppose what was really interesting about this whole journey is there's this idea that if you're working in education, you see the same in social care or health, there's this idea that it's all kind of a fluffy world and it's all nice things going on, but actually it's underpinned by this really sharp commercial reality. And you've got to get stuff done. They've got to deliver meaningful change, and they've got to keep pace with the world, which is moving really fast. And so whilst I thought my move into the project profession might be a real step change, in many ways, what I'd done before, although it's not an obvious move into the project profession, was a really good grounding, because the project profession, I suppose, has a breadth that perhaps my earlier roles didn't, but that focus on how do you deliver meaningful change to benefit society, that's been the kind of golden thread, if you like, right from the outset. So yeah, it's. I think when we chatted previously, I talked about project management gets a bit of a bad rep, because I think people see it as maybe a bit bureaucratic or administrative and so on. That is so far from the truth. I've found since I've got into this profession, it's just a wonderful, rich profession which has strategic impact, and people don't know that. Well, the people in it do know that. Actually, that's not true. People outside of it don't know that, and so I made it part of my mission to help spread the word on podcasts like this.
Yeah, it's so important to spread the word that project management is a very important part of the process. Like running an innovation team, I would have been lost without project managers. I don't know how I would do it, but I love that you're using it too for great causes, like finding giving out education to areas that don't have that access to it. Like I work with a charity called Yes Liberia in Liberia, of course, where right now, education there, 1 in 3 kids can only afford to go to school there. 2 are not able to go. So we're giving them access to school by, paying for their tuition. It's unfathomable to me that some places where you just don't have that education.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, if you think about it, if you try and think of what we're talking about when we talk about project management, in some ways it's about delivering change. And if we think about innovation, what's innovation about? Well, that's about delivering change. It's about doing something different, right? Albeit with the aim of creating value. But actually, I would say that's true of projects as well. You don't a project if you're not trying to deliver something different. You're trying to deliver something that's going to benefit society. We have this great strap line at APM. I really love it. Sorry, for your listeners, Association for Project Management is APM. And the strap line we have is, because when projects succeed, society benefits. Whether it's building a new hospital, whether it's changing the way that we run our schools, whether it's thinking about how we use the latest innovations in technology to drive social change. All of these things are at the heart of them about making the world a better place. Who doesn't want to be involved in that, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so definitely want to make the world a better place, and it's so important that we have project management to help us to lead the way. Can you tell us about any project management projects that you have had in the retail or CPG space, and kind of just walk us through one of those projects?
Yeah, well, there are many, many, many projects I could talk about, and it's really interesting. And some of the ones that I've kind of been involved with, I suppose I didn't always know they were projects until afterwards. You kind of, I think there's sometimes a bit of a blend that can happen with what really is business as usual, if you like, and what constitutes a project. The idea is that, a project has a kind of definite end, but there is a woolliness between, if you like, product management and project management. And product management, is a big area, obviously, in retail and CPG. But if I take something like, let's look at software development. So if thinking about putting in a new version of a CRM system, customer relationship management system, you could argue that that's a project, right? Because you're delivering something meaningful. It's a change. It's going to hopefully improve at the service level that you're able to give all of your customers. But equally, it's a product, right? It's a new iteration of a product. And these two professions kind of butt against each other. And then you've got kind of change management that's going on, and that's a kind of the people side of things. So yeah, we're actually putting a new CRM ourselves at the moment, as the Association for Project Management. And that's interesting, because I think there's this idea that we will definitely know everything in terms of how to do this well. But of course, we're on the same journey as everybody else. We've got all the tools available to us, but actually we face the same challenges as everybody else, in some ways held to a higher level of account because of the nature of organization that we are. But maybe that's just the way things should be. Well, we have a board which is absolutely packed to the rafters with project professionals. In terms of accountability, we're absolutely on the nail with that one.
That must be a very interesting meeting to go to. Be like a fly on the wall on that one.
Well, quite.
Yeah. So you mentioned product management, project management, and then also this change management piece of it. What is the difference between the project management and change management? If you could just expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, it's a good question. And so there's a huge debate, and depending on who you talk to, about which one of these is more important, right? So that, the project professionals would claim that change management is one aspect of delivering a project. You've got to bring people with you. The change management folk would say, oh yeah, there isn't the project, but just the administrative part of doing change management really well. I mean, the reality is they are two different professions which have some common areas of interest. And I think to try and kind of position them in some kind of hierarchical sense is, in my view, not really very helpful. But what they have in common is this idea that people generally don't like change, right? We're quite comfortable with the status quo most of the time, even if it's good change, right? Even when you're going to do something that's going to make people's lives better, they find that hard. And both of those professions, I think, work hard to try and bring people through that process. So in the change management space, a lot of that would be the skills they use for things like doing organizational restructures, organizational design, organizational development. So it's almost very much a kind of people HR focus. Projects, I would say, is much more focused on benefits realization. So it's not just delivering the kind of the output, it's then what's the benefit that's going to have on particular kind of stakeholder groups. You might think that one can't happen without the other, but we do see software is a great example of this, like I was saying before. you do see projects sometimes where they achieve all of their outcomes but deliver no benefits at all, because maybe the world has moved on, and if it takes me 3 years to deliver my software project, and then by the time I've done it, it's not needed anymore.
Yeah. You got to the goal line, but
they have a great expression for this in the Netherlands. I don't know if you've heard this expression. This is to determine. It's to describe when a project is, it's green rated on the RAG, rating, if you like. It's all perfect, but it delivers no benefits. And the expression is this. It's a medical expression. The operation was successful. The patient is dead. So, we've done everything we said we were going to do. The operation went really, really well, but by the way, the person's not with us anymore. This is the kind of worst outcome, in my view, of a kind of project. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. A lot of time spent to get it done right, get it done perfectly, but yet no benefits.
Exactly.
That's great. Yeah. So I want to angle us more towards the conversation of like leadership. So being in a C-suite role, and having to manage a whole company, when does leadership get involved with project management? And how do they get involved?
Yeah. So it's a good question. And I think the short answer is they don't get involved enough. So it's really interesting. So if I think about leadership as kind of C-suite, so I'm thinking about not just the chief exec or the managing director, I'm just thinking of like the C-suite more broadly. You've got a real range of expertise and professions typically represented on a C-suite. You've got finance experts, marketing experts, HR experts, and so on. You get the idea. It's very rare that you'll see a kind of chief projects officer or something of that nature. We sometimes have a CTO, a chief transformation officer. That's probably as close as you might get to this. And I think that is huge, not just a mistake, but I think a fundamental missed opportunity for leaders. Because if I think about what are leaders of businesses trying to do, let's go back 50 years ago. I think most leaders were trying to deliver business as usual for most of their time, and probably a really small amount of organizational change. And I think now that's completely reversed. Most leaders I talk to, the big things they're trying to do is to deliver major organizational change constantly, all of the time. If that's true, and what we've said already in this conversation is true about, what the project professionals do, they deliver change really effectively, then why wouldn't you have this kind of expertise represented in your C-suite? I mean, I'd go even further and say that probably it needs to be embedded within all of the roles, as well as having an individual role with that kind of expertise. So, lots of leaders will do MBA programs, for example, but MBA programs are generally based around the 3 pillars of HR, marketing, and finance. Where's change and transformation in there? See, MBA programs, and I'm making a very sweeping statement here. I recognize before I get lots of letters of complaints saying, well, my MBA program's not like that. I recognize it's not true for all of them. But most MBA programs, I think, are based on those 3 pillars. And they have things in there which are project related. So they'll have stuff on risk. They'll have stuff on stakeholder engagement. They'll have stuff on managing change. But it's not really brought together in a coherent way with project management as a 4th pillar. It's kind of scattered to the wind to a certain extent. And really what I'm calling for is to bring that together, because then projects are really about strategy execution. And I think that's what every leader in the world wants. They want to deliver their strategy, right? Most strategies don't fail because they're bad ideas. They fail on execution, right? Yeah. And this is where the project profession can add huge value. And there's all these people out there, and they're just not considered as adding that strategic value. And I think that's where the mistake is happening.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, Adam. It's like a lot of companies are looking to transform, like you said, and just like it's not like it's business as usual, and we just need to make sure that we're operational savvy here. But it's like, what are the things that we're going to do that are going to create massive change? And if you don't have somebody that's at the top that knows how to do that can create the massive change or bring the idea to life, it can be extremely difficult. But you bring up two. You bring up 2 different kind of points there. Where it's one, do we have like a leader that is in charge of project management that is going to see that transformation, or do you have it sprinkled across about? Like, those are 2 different, really interesting propositions. Like, which one would you prefer? Do you think it's something that should be across the board, or someone that should be leading it that really is like steeped in that profession?
I don't think it's an either or. That sounds like a politician's answer, doesn't it? But I do think you need both. It's because the equivalent is the chief operating officer, right? So if I'm saying, we're moving from BAU to change, then I would say change the chief operating officer for a chief projects officer. But you wouldn't say, well, what do you think about operations? Should it just be the COO that knows about operations, or should everybody know a bit about operations? you kind of would say that we need someone driving this, but that doesn't let everybody else off the hook. So they go, great, I don't need to worry about it. The COO has got it covered. The same is true for transformation and change of projects. Yes, you want somebody senior driving that change, but that having that expertise, or at least a level of competence, basic competence across the C-suite, I think is important. In the same way, look, you wouldn't expect a CEO to be an expert in, the things we talked about before, the HR, the finance, the marketing, but you'd expect them to have a core level of competence across all of those things because that's a core part of the job. It's the same argument that I'm making.
So as a leader, like looking at your organization, maybe you don't have somebody in that position of project management at a higher level. Like, what are some of the downfalls or the things that they should be looking out for that says, oh, I need this? Like, what are the things that are actually happening? If you have any key examples to say, hey, you need a project manager.
Well, yeah, there's lots of examples. So I think one of the things I hear all of the time is when a project goes wrong and someone says, oh, well, we can learn the lessons. We can learn the lessons from this project the next time. But of course, the next time this organization comes to do that same project, those people aren't there, right? So what happens? We see it. They make the same mistakes again. Even if it's other organizations that have made those mistakes or, and we say we must learn the lessons from other organizations. We're obsessed with the lessons learned. What we don't do enough of is lessons applied. Mm-hmm. And this is where actually I think harnessing the power of, AI technology and so on to kind of, if you like, crowdsource those lessons learned at the outset of a project to say, let's make sure we get off on the right foot here. That's really powerful. We have an expression that we sometimes use. We say, projects don't go wrong, they start wrong. And that's because you don't apply the lessons, right? So I think that's one example. I think the other one is kind of prioritization. Most businesses I talk to, they're not short of ideas, right? They've got a lot of ideas of projects they could do. The problem is a capacity issue, sometimes capability, but often capacity, where they say, look, we've got 20 ideas here, but we can probably only do 2 this year. So which ones do we do? And actually the project profession again has part of the answer. So they have something called portfolio management, which actually starts to look at how you choose the right projects that are going to really shift the dial in terms of your strategy. So it's not just, strategy execution. It's also deciding what ought to be in the strategy in the first place. And that's where often there's a huge debate. And in my experience, it usually goes to the person who's the loudest or most influential in the room rather than the best idea. Yeah. So these tools and techniques, I think, can be quite powerful. I mean, you asked me for kind of some specific examples. I'm trying to think, things that your listeners would know. So to use a technology one, I don't know if you remember a couple of years ago. Do you remember Google brought out a product called Google Glass? I don't know if you remember this, the glasses and so on, the wearable technology project. Well, look, we don't hear much about that anymore, do we? It kind of just disappeared, right? And this was supposed to be the next wave. I remember seeing all the adverts and people wearing these glasses walking down the street and getting information and everything they saw. It was a bit kind of RoboCop, if people remember that, right? It was that kind of idea. But what happened to it, right? It wasn't because it was a bad idea. It wasn't that the technology wasn't there. That is an example of something which actually failed because of poor project management, because there wasn't effective risk management in place. And so actually the challenges that were coming down the road in terms of facing the getting this kind of innovation through, that was the downfall of it there. So, what did they fail to think about up front? Privacy concerns. That was one of the big issues. They thought if the tech's good enough, privacy doesn't really matter. But actually it was operating in a wider environment where, things like the general data protection regulations were starting to influence everything. And that just wasn't in there at all. User adoption barriers. Not everybody liked the idea of wearing glasses. Some people don't like it. That's why some people wear contact lenses, right? Not everybody likes glasses. I mean, yours look great, by the way. And then also having that kind of commercial kind of, how do we get this to market strategy? I think there was a kind of view, as I've heard kind of second or third hand, that look, we're Google, right? If we market this, it'll just sell, right? So there wasn't really a proper kind of well thought through project plan in terms of that kind of go-to-market strategies. So that's just some examples of where really effective project management could have made the difference between Google Glass being something that we're seeing on the street with 1 in 5 people wearing it, and the reality of today where is no one's wearing it.
Yeah. Do you think they should have spent more time up front figuring out what the challenges were going to be to move that project forward? Or do you feel like this is one of those projects where Like Google would have said, let's put this one on the shelf and focus in our effort somewhere else.
Well, it's hard to know for sure, right?
Yeah.
But what we do know is that better project management would have given it a better chance to succeed. I think we can definitely say that. I think at the end of the day, you see this in construction projects as well. There's an obsession sometimes with just getting started. So I don't know if it's the same in different countries. In the UK, we have government ministers who are always obsessed with, let's get spades in the ground. That's always the expression they use. We don't want to talk about this stuff. Let's see this that we're starting to build. And I'm like, that's not the beginning. We need to do a whole ton of work before we get to that point to make sure that we're putting the right spades in the right bit of ground to start off with, But I think that as a kind of visual representation happens almost in projects right across the board. Whereas there's an obsession sometimes for those people who are, if you like, the commissioners of these pieces of work to say, look, I don't want to spend lots of my time and money waiting for you to kind of really look at all the options and really think things through. Let's just get going, right? That is one of the reasons why so many projects fail.
That's a good cautionary tale right there, as far as making sure that you are doing that with enough planning and enough research up front, and don't worry about getting started right away. What is the carpenter saying, where it's like measure twice, cut once?
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I like that expression.
We talked a little bit about leadership and how they can advocate for project management and where that kind of needs to sit from a leadership level. But if you're thinking about, like, say, mid-level management now, or just employee level, and you're seeing, like, you're listening to this and you're like, oh my gosh, yes, but we need project management. For the love of God, somebody please bring it in. Like, how do they start to advocate for that within their organization?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. So I think this comes very much back to not just project management, but also the change management piece that we talked about earlier on. And look, having been through this type of situation, both in a kind of leadership role, but also in a middle management role, I've probably got a few different perspectives on this. I think the key thing is that there has to be kind of a constructive approach to engagement, because look, leaders don't want to hear complaints, right? I mean, nobody wants to hear complaints, but leaders, right, whether they've got it right or wrong, if they say this is the way we're going to go, this is what we're going to try to achieve, and then, those in the middle management of the organization start to complain and say, well, that'll never work, or, this is a disaster, or so, then immediately it makes it much harder for them to try and get the potential solutions across to leaders, because they're going to stop listening, because they don't want to hear the complaints. They might say they want to hear them, but really what they want are solutions, right? Or constructive criticism. They want someone to come along and say, look, you've suggested doing A, but if you did this variation on A, it's going to land so much better. Or so it's kind of that solution-focused approach, or also just aligning their own efforts with organizational goals. So there's a kind of objectivity to it. So it's not, I personally don't like what you're trying to do, leader. It's about saying, look, as an organization, we've said that our strategy is to do A, B, and C. You've suggested that we'll get there by doing these particular projects. That might work. Have you also thought about this? And so then you're aligning your criticism, if you like, with the strategy. So it's not criticism of the leader's idea. It's almost how can I add value to what you're trying to do? So that active engagement with the process makes employees able to kind of position themselves, if you like, as valuable contributors, potential future leaders. It can improve your promotion prospects.
Yeah.
Rather than this is somebody who complains about every idea that we put forward, which is easy to do. I think the other thing is to try and put data forwards as well. So that really helps to move it from being subjective to make it being a bit more objective. So you say, look, the evidence suggests that if we did, A over B, that would work much better. And then be flexible. So when the leader comes back and says, well, I don't like that, say, okay, that's fine. You don't take it personally, but you can then kind of adapt, if you like, your position. So you're still seen as kind of supporting the organization. So you're not a blocker, you're an enabler.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think Amazon actually has a saying about that. I can't remember the exact saying, but it's like disagree and commit. So it's like, I don't agree with that, but okay, let's go forward. And so it's that ability to just say, look, I don't necessarily agree with the direction that we're going, but I commit to the direction that we're going.
It's a bit kind of like cabinet collective responsibility, isn't it? You make your points in the boardroom, and actually we should be encouraged to disagree. We talk about at APM, we talk about the importance of being able to disagree well, which might sound a bit odd. But it's almost this kind of, Google psychological safety point, which I'm sure your readers will be familiar with, where, we will have times when we fundamentally disagree and we'll actively encourage those conversations. But as you say, once we've then made a decision, we're not going to be out of the boardroom saying, well, I didn't really agree with that anyway. We're all behind it, actually. And we kind of sink or swim together. And that has to be the way you do it.
Yeah, totally. Now, that employee that like is looking to advocate for change management wants to be a part of that. Like, what if they were just to pick up the project management aspect of the role? Like, how would you're just like employee that has no project management experience start to get involved with project management in the organization? Like, what can they do?
Yeah. Well, I suspect they're probably already doing some things that are in the kind of project management playbook, if I call it that. So I think there's a kind of recognition of what they're already doing. So becoming aware of that. There are lots of courses, kind of introductory courses out there. We have one called the Project Fundamentals qualification, which is like I sometimes call it project management for non-project managers. Don't tell my organization I said that. Oh, dear, I've announced it online. But no, because it's very much that kind of introduction. So it teaches you about the terminology. It introduces some of the basic concepts. And what usually happens when people go on that kind of program is they go, yeah, I'm doing 50% of this already. So there's a kind of realization. But then what they can do is they can formalize what they're doing. They get the tools that sit alongside the skills that they probably already have. And then they can start to actually get some impact from the work that they're already doing. And then, of course, two things happen. Either people really get the bug and they just want to kind of do more and more of it and do high-level qualifications. And then there's a whole kind of breadth of generalization and specialization type things they can do. Or people say, yeah, that's good. I've now got this approach. I've got a way of kind of communicating my ideas in a really effective way to the business. I'm going to make sure I keep doing that going forward. It's very rare, if ever, that I see somebody that goes on one of these types of programs and says, oh, well, that was a waste of time. I'm never going to use that. In some ways, it's kind of an extension of common sense, but it just gives you that.
I like the way you phrase that. Yes.
But it gives you that kind of practical way of packaging it up so it really works in a business context.
Yeah, it almost does. Oh, that's why I was doing it that way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Use the science behind it all. That's great. So you mentioned the course that you have at the Association for Project Management. Like, how can people find that? Is it what's your website?
Yep. So the website is, we don't say www. anymore. That's the standard old school.
Anymore.
No. HTTP. Yeah, we don't need to do all the colons and everything else. So it's at apm.org.uk. And on there, you can find information about membership and different grades of membership, also about the different qualifications. I mentioned the fundamentals. There's also the management qualification. And then we also have the chartered standard as well, which is kind of the Royal Chartered Standard, which I refer to as the kind of license to practice, if you like. So that's a kind of competence-based standard. And I'd also just encourage your listeners as well to follow us on LinkedIn. Really vibrant community on there, more than 130,000 kind of followers and people in the group there. And they have some really punchy exchanges, punchy and professional, I would say. But every time I go on there, I learn something. And I imagine everybody who's on there is in the same boat. So great community to be part of.
Oh, awesome. I'll put those in the show notes too. So everyone that's listening right now can go to the show notes and get into that group on LinkedIn and follow along and definitely check out the website as well. Some really great tools and resources that are there. Adam, it's been great to have you on. Is there anything that you want to leave the audience with? Any last pieces of advice that you have?
Well, I've said some of it already. I'd make the data point again. Make sure you leverage data to really drive informed decision making. I think that's important. One thing that the project profession does really well is it kind of goes beyond individual functions and kind of draws upon that kind of the benefit of kind of having cross-functional collaboration, if you like. So that's why I always say project professionals make the best CEOs, right? Because they've already got that experience of working cross-function. But I think the last thing I would say is really try and build resilience when it comes to risk management and do that in a proactive way. So we talked about this a few times through the conversation where it gets to the end of something and then it's gone wrong and we say, oh yeah, we didn't really think about that. That proactive risk management, really understanding what could go wrong. And we have an exercise called a pre-mortem that we sometimes do to kind of, flush that type of stuff out. That planning phase is really, really important. So invest in the planning and build that resilience around, using risk management.
Wow, Adam, that's great pieces of advice. I know everyone here has learned a ton on project management and how to manage change within the C-suite and beyond. So I can't thank you enough for being on the show today. Thank you so much for sharing your wealth of knowledge here today. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me, Matt.
Of course.
We have made it to the end of another episode. Thank you for tuning in. A couple of things before you go. If you have found value in this episode, I am sure you'll find value in what we have coming up. So please subscribe so you will have access and know when we launch the next episode. Also, leave a review. The more reviews we have, the further our reach becomes, and I truly want this to be heard by as many leaders as possible. Don't hog this all for yourself. I would love to hear your insights on this topic, so meet me on social media at Matt Mueller Innovation on LinkedIn and Instagram. And lastly, if you want to learn more about my story and what I can do for you and your company, go to themindfulinnovator.com. I would love to help you innovate on purpose. Until next time, just remember, bring a level of awareness to each conversation, each observation, each moment, and you can create great change in this world. Thank you.